Salutatis Cupuli. This is the video about Cleopatra. We're going to get you an intro into Cleopatra's first, just who she was, why she's significant before she becomes a part of Roman history as well. And the video I'm going to show you, I'm not actually going to do it myself because this one does a really, really good job. However, it's 45 minutes, but I got it down to 10 because I filtered out the stuff about just plain Egypt and Alexandria because we need to focus on Egypt and Rome as one, how they interacted, what's the history there, did Rome ever take over Egypt? We're going to answer all those questions with this video. So I'll be skipping around. I might talk a little bit every now and then, but enjoy.
Most people know the name Cleopatra. She's remembered as a legendary temptress, and for the men she seduced. The true story of Egypt's last queen has been obscured by soap opera and scandal.
The life of Cleopatra is a mystery, but she was a magical queen. Her beauty captured the hearts of the most two powerful people on earth.
She was an extraordinary woman of her times, one who made no distinction between private and political life. The choices she made helped shape world history, and yet physical evidence of her reign is hard to find.
Even though Cleopatra is so famous, most of what we know about her is hearsay or myth. It's important to look for Egyptian evidence of Cleopatra because she's the ruler of Egypt. It's her home and it's her country. If we find Egyptian evidence, then we'll have the Egyptians' own perspective on Cleopatra's reign, not the Romans.
Cleopatra was born into a unique period in Egyptian history, one where two cultures had fused to produce an entirely new society. While she may be remembered as an Egyptian, she was actually the product of a Greek dynasty who'd arrived in Egypt some 300 years before.
These people were basically Greeks from northern Greece in Macedonia, what we call it today. The dynasty was founded by Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals, who followed him across Asia. He essentially took control of Egypt and founded his own dynasty here. Essentially, the Ptolemies were Greek and Egyptian.
The Egyptians had been building their own unmistakable monuments for 2,500 years, but the Ptolemies still left their mark. Egypt's cities are full of ruined Greek-style buildings. Even here at Saqqara, the pharaoh's ancient burial ground, there are statues of great Greek thinkers, Homer, Plato, and others.
After several unremarkable Ptolemaic rulers, the last real ruler of the Ptolemaic period of Egypt was Cleopatra. She ended that Hellenistic period, begun by Alexander several hundred years previously.
Whenever Cleopatra's story's been told, her looks, her supposed legendary beauty, have played an important part. But it's clear this is a caricature. This is the woman who met Julius Caesar, a conqueror, a dictator, and forged an alliance.
Julius Caesar and Cleopatra knew what each other wanted. They were mental equals, political equals, and they were both as cunning and conniving as you could possibly be.
Caesar and Cleopatra's alliance lasted 4 years. It appears to have worked so well for her that it caused jealousy and concern in Rome.
The senators were very disturbed by Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra, and it was probably because of the situation that they eventually did decide to murder him.
The assassins who stabbed Caesar in 44 BC thought they were striking a blow for Rome. But they also dealt a mortal wound to any hope that the two empires could coexist. Rome would soon be torn by civil war. The prize for the winner was Egypt. When Julius Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra lost her lover, the father of her child, and an ally who'd been the most powerful man on earth. It's believed she made a public display of her grief by building him a great monument.
Cult of the Roman Caesar.
The building had a life after Cleopatra's death. When the Romans had finally installed themselves in Egypt and their emperors came to be worshipped as gods, the Caesareum became a cult temple. Originally constructed as an Egyptian monument to a mourned friend of Egypt, it was enlarged and extended, a reminder in stone of Rome's dominant presence and power.
There are descriptions by Philo of Alexandria. He certainly says that it was splendid, it was rich, it was adorned with many statues. The overall impression of it is being a rich, rich cult site, which would figure if it's dedicated to the emperor.
But by the time that account was written, whatever structure Cleopatra had built was probably long gone, swept away by the Roman forces, which some experts say tried to erase her from history. Because Cleopatra was there when Rome nearly tore itself apart. After Caesar's death, she began a relationship with Mark Antony.
Mark Antony was a Roman general, and he was sort of the right-hand man of Julius Caesar. After Caesar's death, Mark Antony was sharing power with Octavian. They were sharing the rule of Rome, and Mark Antony was given the eastern part. So because of that, he came to Egypt, and he met Cleopatra, and of course began a relationship with her.
The relationship between Mark Antony and Cleopatra produced 3 children. It's remembered as a doomed romance, but it may also have been another smart move on Cleopatra's part.
With Julius Caesar out of the picture, Cleopatra still needed an ally in Rome. Securing Mark Antony's support was another canny move on Cleopatra's part, helping her to protect Egypt's interests.
Cleopatra needed a strong, powerful ally to replace Julius Caesar, and the only candidate that was viable was Mark Antony. And the two of them ultimately forged an alliance where they thought that they would pool their resources together, fight against Octavian, and the winner would take everything.
Roman historians recorded how, in a ceremony called the Donations of Alexandria, Antony and Cleopatra divided up their empire and made their children heads of state. Cleopatra was to rule Egypt with Caesarion, while the rest of the lands were divided between the 3 children she'd had with Mark Antony. But the idea he was giving territories away made him new enemies at home.
The reason it fell badly on Roman sensibilities were that these territories were not Antony's to give.
With strengthened support, Mark Antony's rival, Octavian, saw an opportunity for final victory.
Mark Antony and Cleopatra went into a naval battle with Octavian, and they were defeated, and there was no coming back from it. And they both knew it, and they both sank into despair when they returned to Egypt, just waiting for Octavian to come back and take control of the country. Mark Antony fell on his sword and was taken to Cleopatra in his final death throes and died in her arms.
Her lover was lost. Egypt was lost. She too committed suicide.
We don't actually know how Cleopatra died. Roman writers have given us 2 different versions of how Cleopatra killed herself. Either she ate a poisoned fig from a basket of figs, or she used an asp, a poisonous snake, which would have been a symbol of magic and power in Egyptian religion.
Even Cleopatra's suicide seemed an act of defiance. By taking her own life, she prevented Octavian parading her through Rome as a symbol of his triumph. But with Cleopatra's death, the last barrier protecting Egypt was removed. Octavian declared himself the first emperor, Augustus Caesar. The Egyptian people immediately became Roman subjects.
After the death of Cleopatra, Egypt became just another province in the Roman Empire, albeit a very wealthy and important province.
Gradually, over time, Egyptian traditions like the language and religion faded away. and Egypt wouldn't be an independent country again for almost 2,000 years.
Cleopatra's defeat and death opened the door for full-scale Roman occupation of Egypt. But can this be seen as her own personal failing? Many historians argue that without her, Roman domination would have come far sooner. The proof she frustrated the Romans lies in the fact that they tried to blacken and even erase her name. Setting aside the Roman view of her, the evidence paints a portrait of a unique woman. She presided over one of the greatest cities in antiquity and left her mark at some of the most beautiful temples. For 2 decades, she protected her country from the world's first superpower. She simply couldn't stem the tide of history.
The story of Cleopatra is the twilight of Egyptian civilization as we know it. We looked at Egyptian civilization from the pyramids through Tutankhamun, through Alexander the Great, and with her death, pharaonic civilization ceases because the next ruler, Augustus, is an absentee landlord, and there is no monarch present in Egypt. She is the last page of the last chapter of the glory that was Egypt.
All right, that is going to fill in a lot in the study guide. There's a Cleopatra reading in your packet that will also maybe fill in a couple gaps that this left. But that's pretty much the overview that I wanted you to have of Cleopatra. We talked a little bit about xenophobia and how that affects Rome and Egypt. But I have a direction for you for the end of the video, and that is to tell me why Cleopatra has an olive tone to her skin, like a Mediterranean person might, like from Greece or Italy. Why does she have that sort of skin tone? Any picture you ever see, that's her skin tone. So let me know what you think. Okay, straw out.